I'm going to protect the name of my listener, but a listener who I'm quite close with, meaning they're a relative. They're not a relative that lives with me or where I pay their tuition. Okay, so it's not my immediate family. Who was trying to figure out why their prescription drug coverage premiums were going up 40% for the next year. And this person was asking me, is this due to how many prescription drugs are going to be impacted by tariffs? What is this all about? So I've been doing some research on this topic, frankly, to answer this question properly for my relative on this front. And here's basically here's what is going on. First of all, you have a Medicare prescription drug plan that was essentially subsidized this year, and they're taking away that subsidy going into next year. And some people are going to experience a hike of up to 40%. And it sounds like my relative is on the upper end of this hike. As for the issue of whether there is any sort of tariff potential impact on prescription drugs in general, the fact is we do import quite a bit from Europe. We do import quite a bit of prescription, particularly generic drugs, both in Ireland and India. Those are two big places, and with China. So the likelihood that the raw cost of getting certain generic prescription drugs in particular into the country is going to be impacted by tariffs. But to answer the question for my relative in general, the biggest impact is this prescription drug benefit that basically had an artificial sort of keeping this subsidized for this year. They're taking that away, and some people are getting impacted quite a bit. Look, this is the type of stuff that starts to chip away at people's personal savings, chip away at, and you add to the cost of life, right? You're adding to the cost to live on this front. A few other things that have added to that cost of living over the last, we got a report last week, and I wanted to share with this sooner. Other things got in the way because they were bigger stories at the time. But coffee prices, remember I was telling you, coffee is the new gas prices that you've got to keep track of. Coffee prices continue to surge. They are, once again this month, 20% higher than they were last year, because now you're starting to see all of the tariffs kick in on some of the biggest producers. In fact, one New York City cafe owner said they finally had to hike the price of just a cup of drip coffee by 50%. This person said, "We have held off on making this change for as long as possible, but there's no longer possible. This adjustment is necessary." Just to remind you, okay? Just to remind you, we don't grow coffee anywhere in this country, okay? There's a little bit of coffee grown in Hawaii. And if you've ever had the Kona blend and ever bought it at the store, it's already extraordinarily extra high priced, okay? I have to tell you, I love that stuff when you I'm a obsessive coffee drinker. I have finally been turned on to a French press, and oh, what a difference it makes. Totally true. My friend Tanya Davis, she's the one, former colleague of mine. She gave this as a going away gift. She was convinced that I would finally understand and see the light. She is right. So I thank you, Tanya. I know you listen. So shout out to you on that. And there's nothing like getting that Kona coffee in that. But it is super expensive. It was super expensive already. And it is gone. It is getting, that isn't going to go up because I hope we're not going to start adding tariffs to different states, but who knows, that'll happen. But in the continental United States, we can't grow coffee. We essentially are importing it everywhere. Whatever you have, your Folgers, that's imported. All of it. This stuff is hitting, and it's starting to hit on this front. So look, we have this interest rate cut because everybody's nervous about this economy. And we have cost of living is inching up. The good news is it's not going up as fast as some feared, but part of the reason it hasn't, is a lot of people thought all of these tariffs would be front loaded. They haven't. We've had some of them sporadic. The president has sort of been on again, off again with some of these tariffs, depending on the country. So it is really now this fall that it's starting to kick in. And then, of course, you've got the job issue. And then, what's really scary on the job front is when you get headlines like one that just came over the transom about an hour ago from the CEO of Anthropic, one of those huge artificial intelligence companies, who expects over the next 5 years massive job losses in the white collar sector, massive job losses. So this is going to be a real challenge. I think it's one of the fear of AI displacement, and AI displacement could be sort of what NAFTA did to the Midwest. This could do to the entire white collar world. I think it's notable that one of the first new policy proposals I've heard about AI displacement comes from somebody who's thinking about running for president in 2028, and it's Mark Kelly. Mark Kelly's out there proposing that the big AI companies ought to that there ought to be a special fund that they're essentially in exchange for this lax regulatory environment that the Trump administration is pushing for these AI companies. And I question whether we should have such a lax regulatory environment, because it really went well with the tech companies when it came to social media. They're so trustworthy. But if we're going to do that in exchange, they ought to help create a fund for job retraining for displaced workers. Look, those were among the promises that were made during NAFTA. Most of that stuff fell through. Yes, some people never took advantage of some of the new education training that was available to them, but I think a lot of that had to do with poor implementation of those programs. But the fact that I think it's interesting that it's the first presidential candidate I've heard trying to come out with a policy proposal that I think's going to be replicated, right? I think you're going to hear a lot of people try to come up with something, because the idea of the fear of AI displacement and actual AI job displacement by 2028, I think is an issue that I do think anybody running for president needs to be prepared to deal with and have.